There are a lot of different types. Usually, especially in research, we kind of categorize them into three major types. One that probably most people are familiar with is the swinger type relationship, where there is one couple and that's the only emotional connection and commitment that people have is to this one person. So it's very couple-centric, and then they agree to go and have sex or play with other people, usually together at sex parties or lifestyle events, or bring in sort of a third person or a couple or something like that. So it's emotionally exclusive, but sexually non-exclusive, and usually that sexual non-exclusivity happens together as a couple. The other again couple-centric form is the open relationship, where people again have these singular emotional connections with one person, but then they are allowed to go and kind of have sex with other people outside of that. But usually not emotional connections. And then finally, polyamory, multiple loves, or just poly for short, is people who allow not just sexual non-exclusivity, but also emotional connections with other people. So it's basically creating multiple relationships where everyone is aware that there are other relationships going on as well. There's a lot of stigma against all of these types of relationships, just CNM in general. There were a set of studies that were conducted at University of Michigan with large samples of people of all ages, where they were looking at people's sort of thoughts and ideas about what are CNM relationships like, and what are CNM people like in comparison to monogamous ones. And they found huge differences in perceptions. So people in CNM relationships were perceived as more unhappy, as sort of worse, in worse relationships, that their relationships were not as sexually satisfying, they were not as warm and trusting and loving, that they were much more likely to have all sorts of sexually transmitted infections, even that they were worse at things that had nothing to do with sexuality or relationships, like taking their multivitamins every day, or walking their dogs, or paying their taxes. So there was this just general, we call it a halo effect, where if you perceive a certain group or a certain individual as in a negative light for any reason, then you kind of extend that negativity to everything that they do and everything that they are. And so we do see this very strong effect against CNM people. Interestingly, even CNM people perceive CNM relationships and people as inferior to monogamous relationships. And the way we explain that is kind of like internalized homophobia. When gay people, because they live in a world that is sort of anti-gay and homophobic, they internalize that sense of being gay is worse than being straight. And so it's kind of probably the same process happening with CNM people, because they live in a world that's so anti-non-monogamy. They kind of feel like their lifestyle is less valuable or less sort of positive than the monogamous lifestyle. Another interesting thing is that not all types of non-monogamy are equally as stigmatized. So there was a follow-up study from the same research team that found that poly people are kind of liked a little more than swinger people. And the open are somewhere in between. But yeah, the swingers were the ones considered most irresponsible and just kind of the worst people in this. Thinking about what may be causing this, why is swinging worse than polyamory? The most likely explanation, I think, has to do with valuing of casual sex versus sex for love. Because in poly relationships, people are having sex with people that they are presumably emotionally attached to and romantically committed to. And that is more acceptable to us than just going out and having just random casual sex. And so I feel that because the swingers, you know, most of the sex that they're having with other people is in this casual sex kind of context, that they are taking the brunt of that anti-monogamy or anti-non-monogamy effect. I don't think there is any one reason for that, but there's certainly a lot of different influences that have, you know, made it to where we are now. Religion is a huge one, especially in the Western world. So Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they've all been very anti-sex that is outside the realm of marriage. In fact, you know, Islam and Judaism are more sex positive when it comes to sex within marriage. Christianity, especially early Christianity, was very anti-sex in general. They saw this ideal of purity as the highest form, and marital sex was kind of the worst of, you know, the lesser of two evils, sort of or a necessary evil. But still an evil, and so especially in the Christian world, you know, we still feel that weight of, well, if you must have sex, then it should be in a long-term loving relationship. That's, you know, that you signed a piece of paper, you know, in front of the state and the church to make it valid. So we carry that sex negativity and the idea of sex for just pleasure and fun. Patriarchy, sure, I'm sure that plays a role, especially when it comes to, you know, preventing women from having sex and sex for fun, and, you know, sex with other people who are not their husbands. And yeah, I mean, it's almost it's this very strong kind of instinctive almost reaction, not instinctive, it's kind of a gut reaction that people have against sex for love, for fun in our culture. That I think is, I mean, it's slowly changing. It's certainly getting better. You know, attitudes have become a lot more permissive over time. So about, you know, 40 years ago, there were no people in favor of casual sex. Now, about, you know, you ask any sort of group of young people, and about, you know, 40–50% will say, yeah, I think it's okay to have casual sex. So things definitely change.